get this figured out yet. This is the conclusion of my 9/11 quiz discussion, and it should be a shorter piece. When I was attempting to finish last time, I was on the 10th question, and I was talking about some of the things that had to do with this whole process and how we might look at who should be accountable and what is involved in the 9/11 process. First of all, there has been a great deal of discussion, and there is a constant drumbeat against having any kind of conspiracy theory. And it is true both of the administration, not only of the Bush administration, but the Obama administration as well, and certainly almost all of the administrations back to 1963 when JFK was assassinated and the CIA came up with the idea of conspiracy theory to fend off anybody who might have an alternate idea of what might have happened then. And certainly that has applied to all of the kinds of anomalies and various kinds of public events since then, and none more than 9/11. So we have videos, of course, and you can find them on YouTube, of George W. Bush saying, don't be thinking about any of these conspiracy theories, because by gosh, those things are detrimental to the whole process, and it is going to distract you from the truth. But the truth of the matter is that the administration's position about what happened on 9/11 is a conspiracy theory. And at least as it relates to the Arabs and Osama bin Laden, they have presented to us a theory. The theory is, the conspiracy theory is that those 19 people, plus whoever backed them up, plus Osama bin Laden, conspired against the United States of America and against the people that were victims in the airplanes and in the towers and in the Pentagon. But their theory is a matter of scientific fact only stands up if the term theory meets the facts. And where the rubber meets the road, one must say, does the theory fit? And the facts cannot be made to fit the theory, as has often been done clear back into the Dark Ages. The theory must be made to match the facts. If you have a paradigm and the paradigm is consistent with the outcome, with the process, the phenomena, the sequence, and the outcome, then the paradigm holds. The theory holds. If the paradigm or theory that you have, the promotional aspects that you have about how something occurred, do not fit your theory or paradigm, then they are subject, first of all, they fail in some fashion, and they are subject to review. And in science, if you have a theory and there are anomalies, then scientists know that the theory does not hold. It is faulty in some fashion, and it has to be reviewed and reconsidered. And if you look at any basic scientific principles over the last 2,000 years, scientists made approximations on the truth. They call them theories. They were theories. They're only good in certain circumstances, or they were inadequate, or they were faulty, but they didn't have a better one. And then a theory comes along to supplant it. Well, that is also true with factual information. And the theory must be made to match the facts. So in this case, what I attempted to do with the 10 questions was to say, do the answers to these 10 questions, do the facts which relate to these 10 questions, meet and match the administration's conspiracy theory? And if they do not, then their theory must be questioned, and their conspiracy theory must be thrown out as faulty in some respects. Does that mean that Arabs didn't do it? Maybe not. Does it mean that Osama bin Laden had or did not have anything to do with it? Probably not. Does it mean that somebody else committed those acts of terrorism? Probably. And it also means that there are people who should be held accountable. If one looks at the death of 3,000 people, if one looks at the involvement and engagement of all of the parties that are involved to have made that event occur, there are no less than 20 people, according to the administration, and perhaps as many as 10 or 15 or 100 or 1,000. And to use a quote from Sir Walter Scott, often misascribed to Shakespeare, the comment is, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive." There is no question here that there was somebody practicing to deceive. Fortunately for us of Americans, the practice was just that. It was a practice. It was an inadequate, inappropriate, failed process. But the problem with it is that if no one questions or challenges or stands up to the failed process, to the functionally flawed conspiracy theory that we have been told is true, if no one stands up to that, then it stands even if it's false. If no one challenges the results, it stands even if it's wrong. It serves as a monument to history, even if it's wrong. And it would go down in history as true, even if it's wrong, even if in no respect it is accurate. And so what I see that we must do is to step forward and say, all right, look, this is a faulty process, and at the very least we know that the facts as presented do not match the theory that was given to us on 9/11 or shortly thereafter by the mainstream media or by the administration of George W. Bush or anybody else thereafter. Now let's look at this from a deeper perspective. There are 535 congressmen and senators. You and I elected those folks. You and I elected Obama, and in some fashion, whether you did it or not, the American people elected those congressmen and senators and president and vice president, and we have done this now after the Bush administration, twice for Obama and once now for Trump. And for those purposes, we have continuously watched on both sides of the fence, on both sides of the duopoly, the Republicans and Democrats, we've watched them say, oh, those horrible things that the Arabs did to us on 9/11. And my question to you folks is, if the facts as I have presented them, as thousands of people have presented them, as has been shown to be consistent with what we have seen and what has been followed and the FOIA requests and the radar and everything else that has to go along with it, that there are anomalies in the system and there is no possibility that the conspiracy theory as presented by the Bush administration is true. There's no possibility of it. And because there are not one or two anomalies that would require review, but many, many anomalies that require review, the next question then is, of those 535 senators and congressmen, how many have stepped forward and said, this is no good. This is a failed theory. And obviously there was a conspiracy that involved somebody other than the terrorists we keep going after throughout the Middle East and into Afghanistan. Who does that? When have we had a president or a vice president or a congressman or a congresswoman or a senator from either party in either case that has stepped forward and said, look, I'm going to have a press conference and I'm going to tell you that the anomalies of 9/11 make it absolutely certain that the Bush administration narrative of this was not true. And we need to relook at it and we need to determine who's responsible. Who's done that? And the answer is nobody. They're all terrified to do it. Who in the mainstream media, the fourth estate, our public press is supposed to be there to hold the fire to elected officials and the administrations and the government? Who among those journalists has stepped forward in the mainstream media anywhere and said, look, we need to hold their feet to the fire? You know, there's something that was said in the Simpson case: if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. And conversely, if the facts don't fit, you must seek further. You must find who's guilty. And to that end, let me go back to question number 2, which was how many pilots identified were qualified as capable of flying a 757 or 767. All of these 4 alleged pilots apparently took preliminary private pilot licenses, license exams and classes to see if they could fly a Cessna. Now a Cessna is depending on whether it's a 150 or 172, it's a fixed wing, fixed landing gear, fixed prop, simple 2 or 4 place airplane that weighs 1,000 or 2,000 pounds. Let me round it off. It's 20 or 30 feet wide and 20 or 30 feet long and no more than 7 or 8 feet tall. It can seat no more than 4 people if it's a 172 and no more than 2 people if it's 150. It travels at a speed no more than 125 or 140 miles an hour in a 172 and barely over 100 miles an hour, 110 in a 150. Its landing is at 60 or 70 miles an hour. It takes 40 hours normally to be licensed out as a minimum to get a private license, and I'm a pilot. Not that it means anything, but I'm a pilot as well, and I have several hundred hours of flying, and it is pretty clear that none of these alleged 4 pilots had as much training as I have had or had as much flying experience as I have had, and I can guarantee you I cannot fly a 757 or a 767 even if I was given 10 or 20 hours of simulated flight in a Boeing flight simulator that would supposedly give me some idea of what's going on. If you look at the dash and the function and the controls in a 172 and compare those to a twin-engined 300,000 pound jet, you might find that they're not very similar. The stick is similar, maybe the pedals are similar, I'm not even sure of that, but nothing else is. And it takes a great deal of learning. If the pilots became incapacitated in a flight in which I was a passenger, could I land one of those? Probably not. Could I get it on the ground? Probably not, but maybe. If I was the only person that had any flying experience in the entire plane and I had to sit at the pilot's chair and they talked me down, they would have foam on the airstrips, we would run some dry runs, we would practice the stall, we would attempt to see if I could somehow get it on the ground, and that would be with a several 100-foot wide runway, and they would find the longest runway they could find to somehow facilitate me getting that airplane on the ground. And to get it at 500 miles an hour or 200 miles an hour at any flying speed to hit precisely on a target 250 or so feet wide on one of the towers or 10 feet off the ground at the Pentagon is absurd beyond any comprehension. So finally, let me go to this, and I think this is an important point to make. Who is it in the administration in 2001 that should have known that a Cessna pilot internee could not fly a 757 or 767 300,000 pound airplane with a 160-foot wingspan and nearly 160-foot length and all kinds of fine complications? Who is it that would have known in the administration that that could not be done? Well, let me propose to you that it was a person named George W. Bush that we, the United States citizens, trained as an Air Force pilot during Vietnam, and he was a certified pilot of jet fighters. So I would guess that he would probably have some idea what kind of transitional requirement it would be for a person to climb out of a Cessna into a 300,000 pound jet and somehow make it attack and hit precisely where the parties wanted it to hit in order to cause damage which would cause the whole thing to collapse. I'm sure that he would have some idea of that. So let me be fair. Let's give a challenge. I'll give a challenge. George Bush, I challenge you to fly a 767-200 either by a flight simulator or in person at a target that is set up the size and elevation of the South Tower. And I challenge you to replicate the attack and crash into the tower with the flight simulator of a 767-200. I'll give you a month to practice it, and you can hit it 1 time out of 10. And I'll put $1,000 on it. And if you accept the challenge, I will do what I can to have others like me put up to a $100,000 challenge on it. Now, if you fail to do it, and I expect that you will, if you fail to match the flight pattern of the 767-200 that crashed into allegedly crashed into the South Tower, then I would submit that you would have to agree to a sworn affidavit as to what your involvement was, as to what your knowledge was, as to what you've come to know and understand since September 11th of 2001 about what actually happened on that day on the Twin Towers in New York City. The challenge is out. There's $100,000 if we do it right. There's $1,000 for me. There's $100,000. And so the challenge is, we'll put the money up and we will see whether you can fly the plane, because you should be vastly better qualified than those Cessna trainees that you claimed caused the terrorist attacks on 9/11. The challenge is out to you. Let's see how you do.